And we are there. So welcome everybody. This is ReptiCart Live, our first official live show. I'm Justin Smith, Palmetto Coast Exotics, joined with Mr. Mike Houtzager, Reptiles Express, ReptiCart, all that good stuff, Premium Crickets. And our first guest is actually going to be Mr. Paul Shore of Shore Things Exotics. So we're here to talk about some dart frogs and some of the other cool stuff they've been doing. Paul, how's it been going?
It's been going well. I think everything still knows it's winter time, so not everybody's breeding. Some guys are taking a little bit of time off, but seems like with the collection that we have, there's always somebody breeding, which is nice. We're very fortunate for that. So
Yeah, are you guys getting, Mike? Are you getting snow up there?
We had snow flurries, and I'm in Georgia right now, kind of almost the northern part of Georgia. Had a few snow flurries, but nothing stuck. In the mountains, it did.
Yeah, we woke up to snow the other night when I was letting the puppy out. It was interesting, and we have a new 3-month-old puppy, so she's still trying to figure out life, let alone snow. So she wasn't too impressed, but it was gone by noon. And most of the snow we've had up here, because we're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina now, most of the snow has been over in the mountains. So you can drive and get to see it, but thankfully it hasn't affected us here. But just on the other end with some of the shipping, we've had to be really mindful and careful on where things are going just because of that. So winter's always a challenge for shipping as far as packing for frogs. So.
Yeah, it's they were calling for it down here. I'm on the coast. I'm in South Carolina, and it's like that's unheard of. Like we get like legitimate snow once every like 10 years. So when they start calling for it, everyone starts freaking out.
Yeah.
And it's laughable compared to, what they get up north and, up in sort of Mike's neck of the woods where it gets actually cold instead of pseudo cold. So, but yeah, I mean, let's jump right into it. I mean, how did you come to be into dart frogs and decide to, build a business out of it?
The funny thing about it is I started when I walked into an exotic pet shop after I graduated college. I was given a ball python, and had to figure out how to feed this thing. I knew how to take care of it, but I didn't know how to, where I was going to get products for it and food. And I walked into a pet shop in Jacksonville, Florida, and right inside the door they had a dart frog exhibit, and it was fairly simple and it was small, but it really caught my eye. So I got the food for the ball python and went home and really started thinking about it and went back in there. And that was in 1993. And I've been in and out of doing frogs pretty much ever since. It was just really something different. And once I really got into it, I enjoyed how different the hobby it was compared to some of the other stuff that I've worked with. So I've kind of settled on frogs. We do a lot with geckos as well. It feels like we do a lot of the smaller stuff. So people laugh at me when I say something might be big, but I always joke and say it's big in my world, but not in your world. And when I'm talking to a reticulated python breeder, they kind of laugh at me, but it is kind of funny.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because the geckos kind of go hand in hand with dart frogs in terms of care. You don't need a lot of heat or really any, depending on where you are, and so it only makes sense that you sort of carry those as well and work with those.
Yeah, a lot of the species have similar requirements, which is nice, and we kind of have got around a lot that not necessarily cohabitate, but they do have similar care. And yeah, it does make the husbandry a lot easier. And then we've kind of expanded our geckos more than anything this last year and a half. So, we've now got a couple Australian species. We have some more temperate and arid species as well, which is nice. It's just something different to work with and makes a nice case.
Yeah. You guys were based out of Pennsylvania at one point, weren't you?
We were. We've actually bounced around a little bit, just with some helping out family here and there. We were in Pittsburgh for a while, where we actually had a full shop. We were there to help my mom, and it was going to be part of our 5 to 10 year plan. And as most people know, 2020 was anything but could be something that was planned. So we, with all the restrictions that was up north and within the Pennsylvania area, we weren't able to continue with the store. So we were working down this way and traveling to the North Carolina area anyway most weekends. So we thought it only made sense to that where we should relocate. And I very much am thankful. I saved 6 hours each way. It feels like on a lot of the drives. So
Yeah.
it's made travel a lot easier, and it's nice because we are a lot closer to what was predominantly the biggest part of our customer base. So it's been a good move. It's been stressful. I mean, when you move as much as we had to move, it's always challenging. And but I miss the Pittsburgh area. That's where I grew up. But just as far as what was able to happen with the store, it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, it's already, I feel like storefronts currently are already hard enough to kind of, you know, juggle everything. So when you throw something like COVID in, I think that definitely can be the sort of the nail in the coffin in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, with so much going to online, and that's why, ReptiCart is such a nice other option, because there are so many things going to online, and people like that convenience. And the thing that was nice with the store is, we did a lot just by appointment, so we almost weren't dealing with the general walk in and out clients. We were able to set aside time, just because a lot of our time is dealt with husbandry,
right?
And we work with as many as we did, even having a full-time employee, setting up appointments made it so much easier. So we weren't really still a typical storefront, but again, just the restrictions that they had put on everything just made it almost impossible. So it was, finding things online is where we were, having to go just to survive.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you decide that you were going to do this, as a full-time business? Because I mean, you guys have been in business for, at least 3 years, because that's when I first got my first starts, which was from you at the Columbia show. So what was the transition into that?
We've been doing the expos for we're going on our 7th year. The first year I still was employed full time, but Lindsay, my wife, who also takes care of at least half of the collection, was working full time with the animals. We were doing limited shows just to work around my work schedule. But she had gotten out of the restaurant industry. Lindsay had been working restaurants for 20 years and was decided that, we really wanted to try something different. We've been working with the amphibians as a hobby for a long time. Me primarily. She jokes that she got into it, but she married into it. I always joke she lost a bet, but she was working with it on a full-time basis. And then the opportunity that I was trying to get to just didn't come full circle. So we made the leap and started doing it full time. Both of us about 5 years ago now. But prior to that, we had been doing some shows, and before that, I was pretty much just a hobbyist that was shipping stuff out. I'd advertise some things if I had it online, or reach out to some of the people that I knew and do wholesale. But with the big jump, we just really, it was nice to be able to get both of us in and work on it full time. So both of us, I think the company actually formed 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Hey, are you going to be at the ReptiCon show this weekend, Paul?
In Charleston, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We're driving down to Charleston. I've done Charleston several times in the past. We've actually had some customers reach out, and which is nice. We always encourage that, to do pre-orders. It does help us with inventory and make sure that we're bringing the right things. And if anybody's really interested in something, they can pre-order it, and we can just set it aside for them and bring it to them. But yes, we will be in Charleston this weekend.
And you guys vend, most of the shows you guys vend is in like the Southeast region, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when we were in Pittsburgh, we were still getting down this way. So in reality, we were up into New York. We did as far north as Rochester, New York. We did the Expo. There was a couple smaller ones in the Buffalo area that we did. We did some in central PA, we went with Repticon up to Baltimore, and then down as far as Atlanta, and then Columbia and Greenville. So we were still pretty much traveling from New York to Georgia when we were based out of Pennsylvania. Since a lot of the COVID restrictions, they haven't had as many northern shows. We did one in Gettysburg in November, and it went pretty well. People still, had a decent attendance to it, and we went up with some friends, so we kind of split some tables. But it was nice because we do have some customers that were up that way that were kind of missing us. So we don't plan on getting up that far very often, but it's still in the framework of, if it's gonna, if it's a show we think it's gonna be worth doing, we'll drive. So
yeah, that's a lot of driving.
Our Ford Transit, it gets a workout.
Yeah.
We've only had it for we average about 45 to 50,000 miles a year on the van.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it is in the dealership for oil changes a lot.
Yeah. So I'm interested that this is our first one, so we're all learning sort of how to do this. And you've put some items for sale up on ReptiCart.
I have.
Is that something, Justin, you're going to get into?
Yep.
There. Okay. I'm just interested myself, like there's a lot of different frogs out there. And we've dealt with a lot of different frog people, but how have you sort of trimmed down the line of frogs that you deal with? Is it just dart frogs?
Well, the interesting thing with us is our inventory varies a lot because we produce and we sell what we produce.
Okay.
So not everybody's breeding all year round. We're different in that we're not going to just go online somewhere and order things and have a constant inventory, because not everybody breeds year round. We have some of our larger dendrobaits and some of our bigger phalabaits. They haven't bred for the last probably 2-3 months, just because of wintertime. But thankfully, some of our gecko species do breed during the winter months. And also a lot of our smaller guys, like those ones that you just pulled up, the French yellow legs, they did take a little bit of time off, and but we do have a couple babies now. But they breed, sporadically throughout the year. But again, that's why it's really hard as far as keeping an inventory up to date is a lot of work because things change. There's not necessarily a breeding season for a lot of them, but a lot of the guys, the citronellas that are on there, which is the yellow guy, those just got added. That's a new one for us that we've got. The Azuris isn't always a go-to. Yeah, the citronellas are fun. They're a big dart frog, but it's one that's a new one for us to offer. We've worked with them. Those adults take a year and a half to get to be to the size and accustomed with their mate where they're going to start breeding. So, and I think a lot of people don't understand or really think about is, the eggs that I pull today, I have them set aside, and they're not going to be a frog that I can offer for sale for almost 4 months. So there's 2 months in the water and 2 months of growing, just how our company does things, just to make sure that we can offer really good, high quality animals to the customers. There is a lot of lag time involved. And that's one of the reasons why our inventory changes. I have a lot of customers that reach out and be like, hey, what do you got on a list? What do you bring in? And we're just different in that respect where, if I'm going to, like for Charleston this weekend, it's only Monday. I have a general idea of who's going, but in reality, I need to check and make sure that each of the frogs is at least 2 months old, at least the size that I want, and acting the way that I want it to, because we found that makes customers a lot more successful, and allows them to be a lot happier with the whole experience. So it is kind of a challenge keeping things up to date and making sure that there's There's items that are available, but it's a long answer to your question, Mike. But
I like it.
we are constantly changing though, and it's kind of nice because you have customers that come up to the table and the first thing they ask is, it's not like, hi, how you doing? They're like, what's new? What you got? What's changed? What's different? What species are you working with? And it's something, because of the size of our collection, it feels like there is always something that's different, which is kind of nice. And it also brings you a lot of pride because it's stuff that you've worked with, and if it's sitting on the table, it means it's 4 or 5 months worth of work that you put into that animal. So you really do. I mean, I do take a lot of pride in what we do, and we've also seen that it does help make for a lot. The customers are a lot more successful as well, I think. And that's the ultimate goal: is you want to have happy customers, you want to have successful customers, because that creates repeat customers, and that's where, as a business, you have a better chance of being successful.
Yeah, definitely. So is there a species in particular that you guys focus on?
No, not really. We kind of do.
I guess a genus rather, because I mean, dart frog guys, it seems like it's never just a single species. It's usually like a group.
Well, it's adult Pokemon. You end up collecting them all anyway. So we focus on certain. For instance, some of the thumbnails. We haven't tried to get all of them, but we've tried to create some with enough of a difference that. I think I work with, that guy up there. If you go scroll back up, Mike, or Justin, if you go all the way up to the top, that little guy right there, it's one of the smallest ones in the hobby. The adults that we have are 6 years old, and they're only half an inch long. So there's not much else that looks like that one. But if you go down a little bit to the orange one that's on the right hand
side,
yeah, those guys, they breed like crazy. I've probably got 15 or 16 babies. Most of them are too small to offer for customers at the moment, but it's a great frog that produces a lot. So you try and run and have a good mix of things that breed frequently and things that breed infrequently, because then again, you've always got something that you can offer, but throughout the year you do have different things. So within each group, the Ranitomeyer are the thumbnails. So we try and have, I think we have 16 different species and morphs of the thumbnails. So we always try and have some of those, but that's not what everybody's looking for is the little guys. So we do have some of the larger species, the dendrobates, which is like the Azurus, which is everybody's favorite. Everybody sees the blue frog, and even if you've never seen it before, it's something that draws your attention. So we work with quite a number of those just to try and have those on hand all the time. I mean, I have 6 breeding pairs of those, and so we try and keep those in stock as much as possible. But because they are very popular, you can go to a show and take a dozen and sell all of them. It's one of the ones that people are drawn to because they are so pretty, or they might have seen them in in an aquarium or a museum. And it's always neat when you're in Baltimore, or like Raleigh's got the Science Center, and there's other places that you'll talk to a customer, they're like, oh my gosh, I saw that at the zoo yesterday, and it really gets them amped up about it, and it's kind of a neat feeling. And I'm like, well, you can take one home, and you educate them, and you talk to them, and you make sure they have all the their T's crossed and I's dotted, and they can be successful with them. But so it's kind of funny. We have the animals that we sell the most of, but I think it's just it also depends on how much they produce. There's some of the green and black Aratus that when they're switched on, they breed like gangbusters. I mean, you'll get
those
10 and 12.
Those Vitatus I got from you, like the amount of frogs that they were producing was just unreal.
Yeah, whenever they're switched on, I mean, they'll lay a clutch of 16, a couple times a month, and then they'll shut off for a little while, thankfully, or you get overrun with them. But it's funny because the little guys, some of the thumbnails, they only lay 2 eggs at a time.
Yeah, that's how my Vanzolini are.
Yeah, you might only get 4, maybe 6 a month. but then you deal with stuff just like you're talking about, the Vitatus or the Terribilis or some of the bigger frogs. I mean, they can have huge clutches, and we made a mistake. We don't. People are always shocked that we don't do as much with tree frogs as we used to, but we learned a very valuable lesson the one year. We had 6 species breed at the same time, so we were dealing with about 3,000 babies.
Wow.
We were going through 70,000 crickets a week. Lindsay was pulling her hair out because she felt like all she was doing was cleaning tree frogs. And
Wow.
unfortunately, some of the species we were working with were ones that were still being imported. So, you're competing against that market as well. And it just made for a challenge. So we've kind of back a little bit, and we stagger who we're breeding as far as the tree frogs go. We don't quite have the offering that we used to, but it's just out of self-defense. I mean, it was crazy when we had that many go, and the red eyes were leading the herd, and you have a 160 adult red eyes that you're putting through the rain chambers, and half the time they wouldn't even need to be in the rain chamber, and you'd walk in and find an egg clutch. 50
Hey,
tadpoles.
Paul, real quick, everybody, they always ask me this question, so I'm just going to ask this for the audience. How long do these frogs typically live for? And are there different lengths of time for different frogs?
It really varies, again, depending on the species.
Sure.
Some of the frogs, they can only live for a couple years. Their strategy is, live fast and die hard. They'll have big clutches. They breed very often. But they don't live more than a couple years. Some of the tree frog species, again, it seems like the ones that have larger egg clutches don't tend to live as long. So your red eyes are maybe only 6 years. Dumpies, like 8 or 9,
Wow.
sometimes longer, depending on husbandry. The thumbnail dart frogs, around 9 or 10 years. The thing that really scares and shocks people is a lot of the big dendrobaits, like the Azuris, back to those, the blue guys, 10 to 12 years is average. 15 is not out of the question at all. There's the gentleman in North Carolina who has a 25-year-old one.
Wow.
So I also preface that by saying it really depends on husbandry as well.
Sure.
But all the frog species really depend on being consistent husbandry, and I think that greatly affects how well and how successful you are and how long-lived they're going to be. But their natural lifespan does vary a lot.
Okay. Do most people try to just get one and then have it live out, or do they get breeding pairs like what Justin did?
I think it just depends. Some people want it more just as a pet. We have some customers that want it for their office. They want something as a centerpiece. They'll have something in their living room, so they're not necessarily looking to breed. They just want something that's going to make a nice display or a nice exhibit. But I think once the customer gets hooked and understands that, oh, wow, if I'm doing my job right, these guys are going to breed, they then start to do and look for groups and look for pairs and look for things that they can then produce themselves. Just because that whole process is a lot of fun. So
it is.
I think there's a lot of different aspects to it, but even from the casual pet where they just want one frog because they think it's cool, up to the one that's that has 4 different ones from the same genus. So it's nice. You deal with a broad spectrum of customers because a lot of people have different wants and different needs, but it seems like there's usually a frog to fill the niche.
Yeah, it's they're definitely addicting. I mean, like you were saying, it's you get the sort of the Pokemon thing going on. Like I got my Vitatis from you, and then within no time, I started getting into Ranatomea a lot, which I actually out of what I kept, I think Ranatomea might be my favorite genus just in terms of I like the size. I've always been kind of drawn to the smaller species of really anything. And just behaviorally, like, especially the Vanzolini, like we were talking about, those are known to be monogamous. So you have a pair, and what blows my mind with them is just the fact that they're that small, but they're also that sort of behaviorally complex.
Well, it's neat because some of them have so much parental care, and I think that's something else that people really enjoy working with them, because I mean there's some that go through a whole courtship ritual, egg laying, moving the tadpoles. They take care of them after that. Dad's constantly doting on them, and mom can even come and feed them. So
Mm-hmm.
there, there's some of the frogs in the hobby that I think people really enjoy that, because you really get to watch a lot of that different behavior. And other people like the aspect of it because it's easier. The parents are going to do everything. Your job is to keep the parents happy,
Mm-hmm.
and they do all the work. So it's another
Mm.
aspect that people can enjoy as well, just because they might not have the time to tend to the babies, but they can still be successful breeders just by keeping the parents happy.
How do you do that, Paul?
Yeah, it's
It's it's being consistent. I always tell people that consistency goes a long way with the amphibians. A little bit of work each day goes a lot further than spending a lot of time once a week. It's a different mentality. Speaking of the puppy, she found me. Um, that consistency, spending that 5 or 10 minutes a day, and making sure that their environment stays fairly constant, getting the food that they need, getting the supplements they need, and basically just enjoying them for a couple minutes.
Mm.
You really get to enjoy them, and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to. And the hard part about it is you get to watch the frogs. So
Mm-hmm.
I it just being consistent, I think, goes a long way at being successful. And just not only consistent with what you're doing, but with how you're maintaining that environment. And that's something that we've really understood, and we try and make sure that our customers understand is the environment really is that important.
Mm-hmm.
With any exotic, I mean, it's not going to live in your house or in your backyard. So wherever you have it, you really need to make sure that it's done correctly, just so that they can thrive. And with the frogs, people, they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, don't buy your frogs right now. Make sure you have your habitat done. You don't need to let it sit for months or weeks like some people say, but you just need to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and that's creating a positive, healthy environment for the frogs.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I learned very quickly with dart frogs, and in general, is just it became so much like the frogs are almost the decor and the tank is sort of almost the main thing. Like you would think it would be kind of the opposite, but instead I noticed that the frogs were almost the accent. And if you put everything in there and you had a nice selection of plants and bromeliads and stuff like that, it really is. I like it more than a saltwater tank, and it's way less work than saltwater tanks, that's for sure.
Way easier. Yeah, I've got a lot of saltwater people that they kind of make the leap, and then they come back, and I'll see them the next show, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that's so much easier than a saltwater tank." Like, yeah, it is. It's a lot easier, and a lot of them are. I've talked to a lot of people that have converted saltwater tanks over to vivariums, so
Wow.
I can definitely agree with that. And again, it's the same kind of mentality though, as far as doing a little bit of work, but it's just easier, and that's what I think a lot of people enjoy is, they're always intimidated, and they see this little frog that's only an inch, and I'm like, yeah, that's an adult. That's all the bigger they're going to get. And, once they get over the shock of, oh my gosh, how I'm going to lose it. And I'm like, no, you're not going to lose it. You just need to give it a little bit of love and a little bit of attention. And after they've had it for a little while, they really get that enjoyment out of it, and that's nice. I always like hearing and getting that feedback from the customers who weren't sure, or maybe talked to a couple shows in a row, and it took them a little bit of time to make the jump. But once they do, they're always really happy with it. So it's rewarding in that respect. So
Yeah. Hey, Paul. I'm in the bug business and just recently got into the bioactive business of things. And I've seen it for all sorts of different animals. For frogs, has it always been a necessity to create a bioactive enclosure for them?
yeah, it kind of cracks me up, because I joke that froggers have been doing bioactive before it was cool.
Yeah. Seems that way to me.
Yeah, I mean, even as far back, even my first tank was bioactive, and that wasn't even on anybody's radar before then. You just ended up with some of the bugs that came in with the plants, and you're like, oh wow, look what they're doing. You find a dead leaf in there, and you realize that there's little things creeping, crawling all over it. And after you get done freaking out because you're not sure what it is, You understand that they're decomposing the tank, and you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. And
Right.
but yeah, it's one of those where the bioactive, I'm glad it's kind of picked up, because people are understanding that if you're emulating where they're from in the wild, which is really what you're doing, the animals are going to be happier. And I think
Could you
with frogs,
define what
really,
bioactive is, Paul, for anybody
bioactive
who's
basically is you're
yeah.
making a small ecosystem within your habitat. So you're
Okay.
including decomposing invertebrates, which are going to help break down waste and mold. You're going to have just different layering of your soils. So you're going to basically take a small chunk out of the environment that the animal's in, and you're recreating that in your vivarium. And it's nice because in most cases, not only does it look well, but again, the animals are just a lot more happier because you're really simulating and duplicating where they're from. And I think anytime you can do that, you've got a better chance of being successful. And just like you were alluding to, I mean, that's what we've been doing all along as a hobby. Is froggers have learned that they do well in their environment, and we understand how important that is. So it's nice to see that a lot of people are also understanding that having a full environment and ecosystem in your tank with your animals is just a benefit to them too.
So you sell bioactive enclosures that are already set up, right? You bring those to the shows. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. What we end up doing, we learned fairly quickly that a lot of people were intimidated by doing a bioactive setup. They just didn't know how to do it. You go online, you get overwhelmed by a lot of people who, some person has an opinion this way, some person has an opinion that way, and what they're doing works for them, and that's great. But it might not work for the individual. Every house is different. Every tank is different, and I always kind of say that to people, and they think about it and they're like, yeah, if you move a tank from one room to another, it could change. So a lot of people were really apprehensive and reluctant to make the tanks because they were afraid they were going to do it wrong, and they were afraid that getting all the information, they just weren't going to process it right. So what we ended up doing as a company is starting to make smaller ones. We make 10 gallons, and then usually a small vertical tank that's fully bioactive. Your drainage layer, your soil layer, your substrate barrier, mosses, live plants, springtails, and not always isopods, just because I always mention to people that isopods are really more tailored to what animals going in there, but pretty much everybody can deal with springtails. And bringing those and having it where people can have the confidence, and I've been building those for over 20 years now, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I've put my mistakes off to the side and learned from them, and made it so that I've made it fairly simple for the customer. Somebody who has never done it before can come, pick up a habitat that we've built, pick up some frogs, let us help them, and be very successful. And what's nice is they come back to the next show, they're like, it all makes sense, and I'm like, that's what I was saying. So they build their
I want to know, Justin, did you buy a bioactive enclosure, or did you make your own?
I made my own, but I will say, when I bought my first frogs from Paul, they had those pre-made vivariums, and it was very tempting because the price is I was very surprised at how affordable they were, A, and then B, it's not like he was just putting in a couple, Apothos clippings or something like that. I mean, these actually had layers, it was not necessarily layers, but he really made it like a landscape. Like he had levels in it, that were cork bark, and then there was some more dirt up there. There were just little plateaus, and it was just the level of work and thought that went into them didn't match the price, but in a good way. The price, when I saw this, it was a very good deal, and I was very tempted, but I had already had a tank set up at home ready to go. So.
And that's part of the other thing behind it. I mean, we do propagate the plants that we use in there, which does help. But the other thing too is the goal is to try and at least make it as economical as you can. Knowing that you are a business and you still do need to generate some revenue off of it. But we found that it makes that confidence, and that the confidence really is worth it for the customer, because we do know how important it is that the environment's right, and having that customer that is now a repeat customer. And, we've had customers for years and years because of that, and it's one of those where if you can really help them out and understand the hobby and understand the husbandry, you've got a lifelong customer. And that's, that goes a long way. And it's more than just one sale where you could probably make a couple more bucks on it, but you might not have that customer again, because of that. So, I think it's more important to develop that relationship and really have those customers that they rely on you, but you can also help them out at the same time. So, I think that's
well. There's a lot of. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's where the value comes in. Is it kind of goes all together with that whole getting you into the hobby and
and then keeping
giving
you
you the opportunity to understand how much fun it is, really.
Yeah. And I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed building, all the tanks that I have, I built. I did the foam backgrounds and everything. And just the whole, I didn't think I'd enjoy it as much, honestly. Like building the tanks and stuff, I really didn't think that I would get be into it. Like I've never been a big plant guy. But in keeping dart frogs, I kind of by default, you become a plant person. Like you learn about these things and you can see, the different varieties and genus and stuff. Even when you go to like Lowe's or something, you see these plants and you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. It's just funny because I never cared about plants until I kept frogs.
I'm a marine science major that hated botany class in college. I mean, and now I find myself gravitating to the plants, just like you said, because the one hobby feeds the other, and I've got just as many plants as I have frogs nowadays. I mean, it's every part of the day you spend at least a couple minutes. I'll go through and trim up a plant, or try to propagate new ones and learn about them, and it's a whole process. And I might not know the names of all of them, but I know what works well in the vivariums. I know which ones work well with the frogs, so at least I got a leg up on that. But playing the catching up the game with learning of the names of a lot of them. So
yeah. So I've noticed on the isopods, people start out with the basics, say a powder orange or something like that, but then they evolve to rubber duckies. Has that happened to you at all?
Yeah, it's funny with the isopods because I think the first people, you're right, Mike. They get it out of necessity. They're like, yeah, what's going to work in my tank? Okay, what's going to be cheap? All right. So I'll spend a couple bucks and I'll get some powder blues or some dwarf purples. I'll throw them in the tank, and then they start going on a forum and they're like, ooh, those are actually really cool.
Yeah.
The dairy cows or the marbles, the clowns, and yeah, everybody talks about the rubber duckies, and we actually have a couple of those that I'm trying to get to go. I talked to a person that specializes in them, and I kind of picked their brain a little bit, so we're hoping that they'll go. But yeah, it's funny because you go from you start with an isopod out of necessity, and you start collecting them again, and you're like, oh wow, that one's kind of cool. Ooh, that one's different. It's got a different size. It has a different appeal to it, and it is funny where you have isopod people that the first thing they'll go to is look at your isopods and see if you have one that they don't own already, and it's the first thing they'll buy. So it's kind of funny. That's all changed with the bioactives, and it's created its own little community.
They're now collectibles, just like your frogs are.
It's if you had told me 10 years ago that isopods would be like this giant thing that just blew up, I would have been like, there's no way.
Yeah, $20.
It is unbelievable just how popular those things have gotten.
That long ago, the first thing they would have said is, what's an isopod? They're like,
I didn't know.
Bottom of the ocean? They're like, how are you putting that into a habitat? So yeah, it's neat, but I think also it is nice that a lot of them do serve a good purpose and really do help out the customers as well. But it is just as funny to see how many people do collect them and have that as their priority. Is they've got a shelf full of isopods at home. And
I mean, you go to shows now, and there's literally whole tables of nothing but isopods.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's neat how it's evolved, and it's one of those where you thought it was going to be a flash in the pan too, and maybe it was going to last a year or so, but it's been around for a while now.
So the best way of working with Paul Shore and his wife is to go to a reptile show deal with you directly and buy what you want. But not everybody who's watching this video can do that. So that's why we created ReptiCart. What percent of the people do you deal with directly face to face versus that you're selling online? Have you seen your online business tick up with COVID since we haven't had as many shows as we had in the past?
Yeah, the online has picked up quite a bit, but again, it is really seasonal.
Yeah.
This time of year, it's hard to ship frogs, especially. I've got to double box them, and
Yeah.
all the phase 22s and the heat packs. Our business has never been over 50-50 as far as internet sales go. We've always been predominantly with the shows and working with customers face to face. But it has picked up substantially, and thankfully so. Last year, again, because of COVID, that was all we had for 3 months, and our online business is what really saved us. So we're always trying to expand and find other ways to reach customers, and it was one of the reasons we wanted to partner up with ReptiCart and to get a store going on there was. Just other ways to find and reach people. I mean, that feels like as a business, that's what you're always trying to do. Find new customers, find new ways to get in front of customers, find ways to show them your products. And, again, ReptiCart is just another way to be able to do that. So that's why we were to be able to get a store up there and try and get it going.
And this video will be archived. And so hopefully people can go on and see this video and then go to ReptiCart and order their frogs as you have them. So that's just another dimension to what we're trying to add to promote you as well. So, but right now we're pretty much telling customers don't ship. This is early February 2021. It is so freaking cold out there. We don't want dead animals. So we want things safely shipped, and maybe in most parts of the country right now to this week, don't do it. But maybe the next week or the week after, yes.
Yeah, once it warms up a little bit, and again, it's really up to the shipper.
Oh, guess what? We have somebody from England watching right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hello, Caroline. This is the first one, so we're trying to figure out how this works. That's kind of cool that there's actually really people watching us.
Yeah.
Justin, do we know how many people are watching at the moment?
3 currently, but it doesn't tell you what platforms. It just tells you.
Oh, okay. So I'm pretty sure in the future we'll have a whole bunch more. I love this format though. This is so easy to just have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I loved how you just brought up the website. I think in the future, maybe it'd be good to talk about each animal that you have for sale. You want to maybe bring up a web screen or a screen and talk about each individual one, pros and cons, or who's it for that Paul has? How many do you have online, Paul, for sale right now?
I think there's maybe 8 now.
You have 8 frogs?
Yeah,
okay.
On your site, yeah. And like I said, it all varies just because inventory.
Right.
That one right there, the bumblebee is probably one of the go-to frogs. Works very well for first-time froggers. The nice thing about the list of pros is very much bigger than the list of cons. They do well in a group. Not all frogs like company. That one can do well as a group. That one can do well by itself. They like floor space. They like climbing. So they're kind of one of the universal frogs. And it's one of the ones that is a lot of people's first time frogs, because they are very versatile and they do well with pretty much any habitat that a customer's created. So those ones
I've got a group of those, and they got a lot of personality too. They're pretty funny to watch.
Oh yeah, they're great. We work with 4 different morphs of those guys. The standards are kind of the ones that you're used to seeing. We do also have on the site, but they're out of stock, is the banded Leucomelis. That's the one here you go. Those guys differ just in the fact that their bands are not broken up by the spots. The standards typically all have the polka dots throughout their banding, whereas the bandeds are just like their name says. They've got large, colorful bands. So they make them very bright in the vivarium where you can really see them really easily. Again, same kind of characteristics. They're just originally from a different part of South America, which is why their pattern is different. So it's another great first-time frog. A lot of people will gravitate to one or two of those different morphs. The nice thing about those two, again, even in a 10-gallon setup, you can do 3 of them. They do get along in a small group as long as the animals are similar size. So those do make a really good first-time one.
And feed and care. What do you feed them?
All of our dart frogs are going to eat wingless, flightless fruit flies.
Okay.
They're going to eat. Mostly on the market, there's 2 different sizes. They have the melanogaster, which are the smaller ones, and they have the Heidi-eye, which are the large ones. Heidi-eye are about 4 times the size of melanogaster. So depending on what frog it is you're feeding, you're going to use those. They are wingless and flightless, and I always say if they were flying, I would not be doing this. That would be miserable. I do not like fruit flies, but the wingless and flightless is nice. And the benefit to that is you can be in control of your food source. Making a culture every other week, you can, and then buying a fresh one at a show. Mike, you offer them at the shows. You can pick up a new one, and it's nice because you can always kind of freshen up your stock. But in between shows, I mean, just using the dry goods, you can make your food source, so you don't have to worry about is it snowing, is it going to be cold, or the bug's going to make it through shipping. Having that ability to control your food source is kind of nice.
All right, so you need to correct me. I might be wrong. You said wingless, because I always say that they have wings, they just don't fly.
Some of them have what's called vestigial wings, which means they're there but they don't work. Some of the species, they've actually genetically removed the wings. So there are some that are wingless and there are some that are flightless.
Wow. Okay.
It just depends because there are a number of different species of fruit flies.
Do you raise fruit flies that are wingless?
I would have to look because I want to say the melanogaster might be wingless. I don't remember. I know Heidi-eye had the vestigial that don't work. I look at them every single day. And honestly,
well, everybody
they're not flying. That's all that matters.
Yeah, well, no, they always ask me at the table, well, do they have wings? I'm like, yeah, but they don't work. That's my answer.
Yeah, some do, but I know I think on the market there's probably 6 or 7 different types of fruit flies. Some just aren't as popular. Some, take longer to produce, so they're not as. You have to put a lot more thought into it. People like the ones where you got 14 days and 21 days, and you kind of know what you're going to be getting, and that's kind of why we stick with those. I mean, I make between 50 and usually a bad week is I'm making 100 cultures. So most weeks it's about 50, and that's usually split between the 2 types. If I add too many more types in there, I just got to make more cultures. So,
do you do crickets at all, or is it just fruit flies?
We do some crickets, not for the dart frogs. It's really not cost effective, just because they eat so much.
Yeah.
If you got 5,000 pinheads, I might be able to feed, maybe 20 of my adult breeders, the habitats. So it's just not cost effective. When you have, what are we at? Around 80 breeding pairs of different types, plus babies, plus juveniles, plus ones that we're raising that aren't breeding. Between the frogs and the lizards, we're at around 150 species.
Wow.
So when you can save costs whenever you can, so the crickets pretty much go towards the tree frogs and the lizards. There's a few lizards that'll eat fruit flies, but we do crickets for a lot of the our geckos and our lizards.
That makes sense. Okay.
What are you doing as far as supplementation with the frogs? Do you rotate some different options, or are you sticking to one in particular?
No, we rotate through as many as possible because I always am under the mindset that not all of them check off all the boxes.
Right.
That's really what you want to try and do, is make sure that you are having a good supplement rotation. From Repashy to RepCal to, products from ZoomEd to, there's some products from some private companies that we've tried. Um, it just depends on, again, if animal's breeding, if it's not breeding, if it's a juvenile, if it's an adult but it's not breeding, you can vary the supplementation a little bit. So a lot of it is just experience, but a lot of it is I rotate through them just so that they're all getting everything that they need. And that is very important. It goes back to the consistency, putting your supplements on once a month just because that's when you remember it is not always a good thing. All those other times that they didn't get the supplement, they might not have what they need, again, just to be happy and healthy.
Hey, Paul, I'm looking at a poop frog.
Poop frogs are hilarious. It's one of those where even the most, conservative looking person will come up and they'll still chuckle when they see that. It is the common name of that frog. We work with two kinds of poop. That's the South American poop. We have the Asian poop as well, which is a type of tree frog. So we work with a lot of crap here. That one, again, it's one of the tree frogs. They're related to the clowns. Most people have seen South American.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, South American clown tree frogs. They're all in the same genus. It's Dendropsiphus. Those guys are really cool just because they have the different gray modeling to them. And what's funny is whenever they're sitting on the leaf, they tend to curl up a little bit, so they really look like a little pile of poop sitting on a leaf. They don't look like a frog. They will sit on the outside of the leaf, whereas a lot of frogs will sit underneath to hide. Those guys will actually get up on top, and because they sit with the arch, it's kind of where they got their name from. It's kind of hilarious. But yeah, a lot of people just giggle at that. They'll see it, they're like, "Oh my gosh, they have poop frogs," and it's kind of funny.
And how is, in terms of breeding, tree frogs versus darts? I mean, tree frogs are a bit more involved, right?
They're a lot more with it. You usually have to use a type of rain chamber. You usually have to cycle them. A lot of the tree frogs only breed if they know that there's water and their tadpoles are going to survive.
Right.
So our job is to trick them into thinking that they were in a dry habitat. Now they're in a wet habitat. And it encourages them to breed, and their babies will make it. So doing the tree frogs is a lot more involved. But you also normally get a lot larger production, so you don't have to breed them all the time to get a decent amount of babies. Our Borneo fire-eater tree frogs are huge frogs, but you maybe only get 20 tadpoles. Our Dumpy tree frogs, which I just put in the other part of the garage just to cool them off, and most people are like, "Wait a minute, the frogs are in the garage?" I'm like, "Yeah." The Dumpies are sitting at about 62 degrees right now to put them through winter, and when they breed, they can have up to 2,000 eggs.
Oof.
So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm making sure all the other shelves are clean when they come out of the. I had a friend that bred them that was not ready for that, and I've learned from his mistake. He was very, very overwhelmed very quickly. He had a lot of baby tree frogs.
Now, can you mix and match any of the frogs that you have, or do you need to have, like, if I buy a poop frog, do you only have poop frogs in the cage? Can you mix any of your frogs with others?
I recommend going with just individual species. Again, It's one of those, you're going to hear a lot of people have different views on that. I respect all their opinions. From my experience, again, you can tailor the habitat better to the one species and really make them happy. The big problem with tree frogs and dart frogs is dart frogs don't swim. So you have to have a water source for your tree frogs. Tree frogs use a water bowl to defecate in, so that's their bathroom. So you have to be able to change that water out, but they need to have access to water. Dart frogs in the wild don't typically come across standing water very much because that rainforest absorbs that water very quickly. They don't have web feet. They don't have really the ability to deal with that standing water. So if you have a tree frog habitat where you have water and then you're going to mix some other frogs into it, you really need to be mindful of that. And the other thing that a lot of people don't think about is the food. Dart frogs eat small prey items, so they're going to eat fruit flies. A large tree frog is going to eat a cricket that's sometimes the same size as the frog. Frog's going to get stressed out because now it's getting competition from an insect. So the frog is going to get stressed out. And anytime you can minimize stress on frogs, you're going to be a lot better off. So I think the people that do have community tanks, I think it's best if you raise the individual ones first and understand their environment, and then you can be the judge if you want to try mixing them. But we don't typically recommend it, just because you can be a lot more successful. You can tailor that habitat to that individual one, and again, you can just be a lot better off.
See, you can look at a frog, Paul, and say that frog's stressed, right?
Yes.
I can't do that. I would look at the frog and say, that frog is cute.
Yep, that's a frog, all right.
Well,
that's a frog. When you see a stressed frog, what are you looking for? How can you tell?
Body weight and activity level are the two first things you're going to look at. You know, if a frog looks like it's starting to get thin, there's usually a reason for it. You know, a fat frog is a happy frog. You know, a thin frog, with some exceptions, is usually when it's being stressed. Also, is it coming out? Do you see it eat? That's what, you know, the general rule of thumb with most of our frogs, we tell people is, you know, get your morning coffee. Go relax with your frogs for a minute. Go look and do a head count. See where they're at, so you can make sure that everybody's in there. You know, open your tank up, give it a good spray, because most of these guys need a nice high humidity. You know, give them some food, and then watch them for a couple minutes. Enjoying your animals, especially with the frogs, really does tell you a lot about them. If they're not coming out to eat, there's usually a reason for it. You know, if they do look thin, there's usually a reason for it. And unfortunately, it usually is stress. So you being familiar with your frogs and knowing their natural, what they do and how they act and how they eat, is you're the first line of defense. And we're the second line. We're the, you know, I always tell people, if you don't see your frog eat for 1 day, no big deal. If you don't see your frog eat for 2 days, it's a red flag. On the third day, you're messaging me and we're talking about what's going on, because there's definitely a problem.
What you just said is important right there. Do you stay actively involved with your customers and you provide additional levels of advice on how to keep the frog healthy and alive?
That's correct. We're always available for our customers.
That's huge right there.
Whether it's, you know, going through social media, you know, use Facebook for good instead of evil, and reach out to us that way. You can message us. I was on the phone this morning with one of my customers in California. She was driving to work and was worried about one of her enclosures. So we had a quick chat, and, you know, I do it more from, you know, the electronically on electronic ways, but, you know, her situation is a little bit different, and it's easier for her to call. I do have that relationship with a couple customers where they know that they can call me, but for the vast majority, it is done electronically, because, you know, there's most of the time, and I think this is probably the longest that I've gone with my hands being dry. So I normally cannot pick up my phone or answer it. So going electronic is usually the best way. We check our messages in the morning, throughout the day when we're taking a break, and then usually in the evening as well, just to be able to get back to our customers. Because, you know, with frogs, being able to make adjustments quickly is the best way to get them happy again and get them healthy. Letting something go, and I tell this to my first time customers all the time, is if you think it's a question, ask it. Don't go, well, maybe. I'm like, no, it's a question you've got. Ask it. You know, if it's important enough that you've thought about it, ask. And that way we can talk about it, and you can now learn, okay, that isn't something I really need to worry about. Or, oh my goodness, I'm glad I reached out to you, because that was something that can make or break, you know, the success of your habitat.
Yeah, that is kind of the unfortunate side of groups and social media in general, is it makes people a little gun shy to ask questions, for
Yeah, I
fear
mean,
of
so many people
getting
you hear
roasted.
about them. They went online. They thought the right thing. They reached out and posed a question in a group, and then they got berated because they've got people that they forget that there's people that are new to the hobby. There are people that haven't done this for years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even people I learn every day. It feels like, I know who I ask my questions to, and it's very few and far between. But I'm fortunate that I have resources that I rely on too. I don't know everything. I would never claim to know everything. I know who to ask, and that goes back to my college days when my professor told me, learn the material for the test, but after the test, know where to look it up. And anymore, whether it's looking it up or reaching out to people that you trust to ask
Right.
the question to. I mean, you're really just trying to do what's best for your pets, and that's why asking the questions is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And being there for the people and being able to answer the questions is so important. I think that's something a lot of people lose sight of. Unfortunately, nowadays with social media the way it is, and they're afraid to ask, and because they can fix problems and be able to have things get fixed relatively quickly, just by someone giving them a minute of their time. So
So,
I do feel that's important.
see, what I'd like to do, Paul, moving forward with all this is at a show, there's magic that happens at a reptile show, that interaction that you have with a customer, but you're talking to one person about an issue that one person has, but that issue also probably 1,000 other people have the same exact issue. And if I
Right.
could figure out a way that we can use this technology to capture that and then replicate it, to everybody, and they say, oh, okay, that answers the question. Now let me get another frog from Paul. So I don't have the answer of how to do that, but that's what I'd like to try to ultimately, maybe one day we'll bring on somebody who wants to buy a frog and have them ask you the questions. Heck, I
You know,
want to buy a frog now.
They are like the ultimate office thing, man. Like,
I'm thinking about, I'm getting more, as I'm just talking to you, just thinking, I mean, in our office at Premium Crickets, that would be a great little thing to have in the front office. I mean,
well, this is the one thing that I talk to, because I talk to a lot of people about offices, and I actually have schools and school teachers and things like that are customers. And the one
yeah,
question I always ask is, what happens when humans aren't there? Are the climate, because frogs do need 72 to 77 degrees,
yeah.
is the environment going to still be maintained at that, or is it something that you need to do
Okay.
and supplement? So
Okay. So let's treat me as a customer. So I'm at the Repticon table saying, Paul, I want to buy a frog. And then you're going to ask me that question, 72 degrees. So I would say, yes, I can maintain the environment at 72. However, my problem is on the weekend, there may not be anybody there. Is that a problem?
it can't be. It depends on your consistency during the week. The great thing about it, and what we've learned from a lot of our school teachers, is
Right.
they maintain husbandry Monday through Friday. So what happens is you feed a little heavier on Friday. So come
Mhm.
Saturday morning, they wake up and there's still usually a little bit of food in there. And that's one of the things that makes the frogs nice, is they are out hunting and active, and that's what makes it nice to have sitting on the desk, because they are looking for food. So you do get to see
Right.
your critter. Saturday morning, they're going to be out. They're going to hunt around for a little bit. They're probably going
Hmm.
to polish off everything that's in the tank. Going over Sunday, there's really not going to be much in there for them to eat, but that's not a problem. Skipping days isn't a bad thing as long as you're consistent the rest of the time. And the
Hmm.
nice thing about it is Monday morning when you're in there, you can give them a nice big dose of their supplements, because they're going to be hungry. You're going to
mm-hmm.
know that they're going to get a lot of that they need. But what's nice is they're now a little hungry, so they're going to get a good dose of that. So skipping days throughout and having a regiment that includes a day that you skip from time to time is actually not a bad thing. Um,
Supplements. Tell me which ones they are. I know the food. What supplements would you use?
you're going to use a calcium supplement and a multivitamin. We use a calcium with D3 and then a good multivitamin.
Okay.
Just both of those are both important for them.
Do you use the sticky tongues? Do you use that stuff?
I have in the past when I used to breed panther chameleons a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I did. I don't do that one as much.
Okay.
With the frogs, I use the Repashy just because I use Repashy's fruit fly media. So I use their Supervite, their Calcium Plus, and then I use Zoomed. The consistency on the Zoomed calcium is really nice. Sticks to the fruit flies really good.
Okay, and you sell that at shows as well, right?
We do. Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay.
Yeah, we try to be a one-stop shop as much as possible.
So do you know Alan Rapace personally?
I have emailed correspondence with him being in California. I haven't had a chance to meet him in person, but we've had email correspondence. He actually helped me with a fruit flower problem I had, and I figured out it was the lid I was using. I fixed that problem probably about 4 years ago now. And I share that with my customers too. What I learned from that experience, I was losing about 10% of my cultures. They were burning themselves out because they weren't getting enough ventilation. The lids that I was using, the ventilation would almost kind of fluctuate, and it was a manufacturer's issue. So I went to a more consistent fruit fly lid, and I've not had that problem since. But Alan actually helped me with that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see the formula for success in our industry is not being afraid to reach out and ask for help. Because as you said before, Paul, nobody knows everything. No, they don't have all the answers. I mean, in our cricket operation, we've had everything collapse, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. And all of a sudden, it's weird. Everything just dies. No idea why. But if you reach out to the right person, they may give you a hint here, or the other person gives you a hint there. And before long, you've got the solution. So, but if you think that you're that smart and you know the answer, well, you're not going to be around very much longer.
Yeah, well, and it's, again, it's just trying to get over that fear of, oh, I'm going to ask questions and people are going to think I don't know what I'm doing. It's no, you're trying to do what's right by your animals. So.
Yeah, that's why I don't know a lot about frogs, but I don't mind being part of this because I want to be part of the conversation. So, and I like the way you run this thing, Justin, too. I appreciate the smooth flow on this as well. So, all right. So you want to sort of wrap this up a bit? I was thinking about an hour, but we've gone over.
Yeah, it's a little over an hour now. I was curious because you have that picture of that Amirga as your profile picture. Are you still doing anything with those? Because those are gorgeous.
The babies that I have right now are sold and going to New Hampshire as soon as the weather clears up a little bit. I have a couple tadpoles in the water. They're such a funny frog because they're not the most outgoing. They're probably, in my opinion, one of the prettiest. And with everything else, it's in the eye of the beholder. But the chromes are such pretty frogs, but they're just a little quirky. They hide a little more. They sound like a bird. So you think the first time you hear them call, you think you had a bird get into your house. They do well in a group, but when they breed, only the dominant pair breeds. So you have a bunch of
that's interesting.
You have a bunch of cast members that are in the play, but they're not doing a whole lot. They're just holding props. But so even if you have a large group, you typically only have one pair breeding. They have fairly good sized clutches, but their babies come out very, very small. So they've been challenging in that respect, but I love them. They're such cool frogs, but they're a little quirky.
That's a genus that just seems super underrepresented in the U.S. hobby.
I think a lot of it is basic availability. There's a couple species that are here, but there's a lot of species of them that are in Europe. The company Understory in Canada does work with some of them, but they're just a trickier frog to breed. They don't breed for everybody, and there's some that you need to have a decent amount of environment done correctly for them to even get a chance at breeding. So they're a quirky little frog. They're really pretty. Again, the color of that is spot on accurate. I mean, they're that pretty.
Yeah, I remember seeing them at the Columbia show when I got my first frogs from you. You
we
had some
have
for
them.
sale
We
that
usually
day.
have them a couple times a year. We'll have them. They're a seasonal breeder too, where it feels like they breed in the spring and in the fall. So it's not like they're even necessarily going to breed all year round, which is another challenge. But awesome frogs. I love them. But yeah, they're a little quirky.
Nice.
So we have S&H Exotics has joined us, and they enjoy the conversation. Yeah. Thank you for being here with our very first live stream with ReptiCart.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with frogs because, like I said, you'll go down that rabbit hole and you ain't coming back.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Yeah. Well,
hard.
if people want to get in touch with you and they have any questions, where can they? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
They could go through Facebook and go through Shore Thing Exotics, or they can reach out through shorethinexotics.com. We do have a website as well. You can reach out that way and send it via email. But again, Facebook, use it for good and stuff. People go through Facebook and reach out to us, the messenger. My wife Lindsay and I get the messages, and we respond back to those as quickly as we can, just to try and help get customers their questions answered. Those are probably the easiest way. You can check us out on Instagram as well. Instagram will end up getting us a message through Facebook also. Those are really the main platforms that we use right now.
Yeah, I think I included the links below in the description, to the Facebook page and stuff. So
awesome. Thank you.
And of course, on ReptiCart.com, you can directly order one of your frogs, and then the shipping is already calculated, so you have the total price. You may decide to wait a little while before you ship it until it warms up, but you can place the order through that.
Doesn't get any easier than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were double checking the inventory on there as well. So we go back and like I said, our inventory does fluctuate a lot, but we do our best to keep that up to date. Add new frogs as they're becoming available, and the ones that get sold do obviously get taken off there. But you can always reach out if you have a question about a certain species. We do work with a number of species that, again, just because they're not breeding doesn't mean we don't work with them. Always reach out, and we can help out. And if we don't work with it, we can usually know who is and can put you in contact with somebody to help you out.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on, man.
No, thank Justin and Mike for having me on. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for your support and allowing us to do that. Thank you.
Next time I'm at a show, I'm sure I'll see you.
Say hi, definitely.
This weekend.
Yep, this weekend in Charleston.
Yep, Charleston, South Carolina. Just a hop, skip, and a jump from me. So, all right, y'all. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you very much. See y'all later.
All right. Until next time.
Peace.